All right, today we're diving deep into a really powerful idea from chapter 11 of the book Nudge, and it's all about how we can increase organ donations. It really comes down to something called choice architecture, which is just a fancy way of saying how our choices are presented to us. And we're going to see how even tiny, tiny changes in that presentation can have literal life or death consequences. Okay, let's start with just one number, 90,000. Right now, as we speak, that's how many Americans are on a waiting list for an organ transplant. And behind every single one of those numbers is a real person, a father, a daughter, a friend, just hoping for a second chance. And here's the really tough part of that story. The wait is often just agonizingly long. So long, in fact, that up to 60% of those people might die before an organ ever becomes available. It's a huge loss of life, and it's the core problem we're trying to figure out today. So, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the crisis itself. Then, we'll dig into what's wrong with the current opt-in system. After that, we'll explore 4 different ways to approach this, look at the surprising data behind them, see how it's working in the real world, and then wrap up. Let's jump in. At its heart, this is a classic supply and demand problem, right? The number of people who desperately need organs just completely overwhelms the number of organs that are available. And this gap, well, it isn't just big, it's actually getting bigger. Just think about that waiting list of 90,000 people. Well, every year it gets about 12% longer. This problem is not static, it's growing, which means the need to find a better system is getting more urgent every single day. So you have to ask, why is there such a massive shortage? Well, to figure that out, we've got to look at the system used in most of the US. It's a system that actually banks on our good intentions. But as we're about to see, good intentions, they just don't stand a chance against even the tiniest bit of effort or paperwork. The system is called explicit consent, but you probably know it as opt-in. What it means is that the default setting for everyone is no, I'm not a donor. To become one, you have to actively do something. You have to check that box at the DMV, sign a form, and make it happen. And this quote, this gets right to the heart of the research in Nudge. See, the issue isn't that people are against donating organs, not at all. The real problem is what psychologists call the intention-action gap. We mean to do it, we want to do it, but that powerful, lazy force of inertia, that human tendency to just stick with whatever the default is, it just gets in the way. And this chart right here shows that gap perfectly. I mean, look at this. A study in Iowa found that an incredible 97% of people said they supported organ donation. But then, when they checked who had actually signed up, only 43% of those same supporters. The goodwill is obviously there, but the way the system is set up creates this massive barrier. Okay, so if the opt-in system clearly isn't cutting it, what are the other options? The authors of Nudge lay out 4 different ways you can design this choice, ranging from what we have now to some very, very different approaches. We've already talked about explicit consent, or opt-in. The other 3 are routine removal, presumed consent, and mandated choice. Let's take a quick look at what each of these means. So the most extreme approach is something called routine removal. In this scenario, the state would just assume ownership of organs and could harvest them without asking. Now, it's used in some places for things like corneas, and it would definitely solve the supply problem, but it's incredibly controversial because it takes away individual choice completely. Next up is presumed consent, or opt-out, and this is the classic nudge we're talking about. It just flips the default. Everyone is automatically considered a donor, and this part is key, you can easily say no thank you. It still protects your freedom to choose, but it cleverly uses that lazy inertia for good. And finally, there's mandated choice. This approach just gets rid of the default altogether. When you're at the DMV renewing your license, you have to pick one, yes or no. You can't finish the application until you do. It forces you to make an active decision and not just put it off. So those are the options on the table. But does something as simple as changing the default from opt-in to opt-out actually make a difference in the real world? Well, the data says absolutely yes. An online experiment by researchers Johnson and Goldstein showed this perfectly. When they showed people an opt-in system, only about 42% chose to be donors. But when they just switched the default to opt-out, boom, the consent rate shot up to 82%. They doubled the number of potential donors just by changing one little setting. And this is not just some lab experiment. Look at this incredible real-world comparison. Germany uses an opt-in system, and their consent rate is a pretty dismal 12%. But right next door, Austria, a very similar country, culturally, uses an opt-out system. Their consent rate? An unbelievable 99%. The main thing separating them is the default choice. And when economists looked at data from tons of countries, they found that, all other things being equal, switching to a presumed consent model boosts donation rates by about 16%. Now, that might not sound like a crazy number, but in the real world, it translates directly into thousands of extra lives saved every single year. Now look, changing a national law is a heavy lift. It takes a lot of time and political will, but states can use these exact same ideas right now, even inside an opt-in system. And Illinois is just a fantastic case study of how to do it well. This is the website Illinois set up for its donor registry, and the authors of Nudge point to this as a brilliant example of using smart design to encourage people to do the right thing without forcing them to do anything. So what makes this so good? Well, first, it makes the problem real by showing you the numbers on the waiting list. Second, and this is a classic Nudge, it uses social proof. It tells you that, hey, 87% of your neighbors think this is the right thing to do. We're all influenced by what others think. And finally, it removes all the friction. It makes it ridiculously easy to sign up online. And all of this brings us to the biggest takeaway from this whole chapter. The systems we design, the websites, the forms, the questions we ask people, they are never neutral. Every single one has a default setting that gently pushes our behavior in one direction or another, whether we realize it or not. And here is the absolute crucial point. Since there's no such thing as a neutral design, we have to own the consequences of the defaults we pick. An opt-in system isn't neutral. It's a design choice that leads to fewer organs and more deaths. And an opt-out system isn't neutral either. It's a design choice that leads to more organs and more lives saved. And that leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. Knowing that the way we frame this choice has such a huge impact, and knowing that a simple nudge can save thousands of lives while still protecting everyone's freedom to choose, what's the most ethical and responsible default for us as a society to pick?